Imagine this. Midnight falls on a medieval village. The fire is out. 10 souls lie packed in a single room. A goat snores beside the hearth. The straw beneath them itches. Somewhere in the darkness, a husband quietly reaches for his wife. No walls, no sheets, no privacy, only shadows and ears. Now ask yourself, in a world where everyone watched, how did love survive? Forget bedrooms. For most medieval people, even the word room was a luxury. What we'd call a single room today was often the entire house. Think of a packed, dim rectangle of wood, or in colder northern lands, a long, gloomy structure of stone, turf, or wattle and daub. A central fire pit offered meagre warmth, its smoke escaping through a hole in the roof. This one space held everyone: parents, children, grandparents, perhaps a cousin, a servant girl, even a cow for warmth. The bed? A giant shared mattress of straw laid over wooden slats, or sometimes just coarse wool blankets thrown onto the dirt floor. No pillows, no partitions, and absolutely, positively, no doors to shut out the world. Land records from the 13th century tell us most English peasants lived like this, in homes with just one heated space, called the open hall. Probate inventories list one bed for all as normal, not strange. Day and night blurred together. The table where you ate by day became your bed by night. Children slept wrapped in the same blankets as their parents. In the bitter winter cold, families huddled close, not for affection, but sheer survival. There was no privacy. There was barely room to breathe. And yet, this cramped, noisy public space was the stage for marriage, where love tried to blossom in stale air and couples strained to find each other in the suffocating dark. Marriage didn't bring solitude. It brought a permanent, unavoidable crowd. Even the wedding night offered little escape. Forget seclusion. Often, it was the opposite. In some communities, people watched. Ceremonial bedding customs demanded witnesses escort the couple to their shared straw and actually see them into bed together. Proof the marriage was consummated was required. But for most ordinary folk, intimacy had no ceremony, just enormous obstacles. Court records from 14th century Yorkshire reveal a wife accused of lying with her husband behind the bread oven, the only slightly hidden spot in her family's one-room home. In Essex, a servant testified she overheard her master and mistress every single night without fail, separated from them by nothing more than a flimsy hanging cloth. Sex, expected within marriage, became a tense game of timing, desperate concealment, or silent endurance. Parents waited for children to fall asleep, or for a rare moment when the room quieted. Some waited for market days, when the house might briefly empty. Others simply couldn't wait. Church law demanded the marriage debt, sex, be paid regularly. So couples did what they could. Blankets pulled high over heads, voices dropped to whispers, relying on a silent, unspoken agreement that everyone else heard everything anyway. Love was never alone, but it was also never truly free. When you can't build a wall, you hang a curtain. In homes where timber was precious and stone too cold, thick fabric became the only shield against prying eyes. These weren't delicate veils. They were heavy patched woolen cloths, sometimes even lined with fur, strung across beams or nailed into rafters. They did nothing to block sound, but they offered a precious illusion of separation. For a couple, even this thin barrier meant everything: a tiny space to undress, to whisper secrets, to reach out without a dozen pairs of eyes watching. By the 1400s, wealthier peasants proudly listed bed curtains in their household inventories alongside pots and tools, proof that privacy was craved, even if rare. In towns, apprentices might share a floor, but the master and his wife claimed the only curtained bed. The four-poster bed, draped heavily on all sides, became more than furniture. It was a room within a room, a warm cave, a place where touch and breath could belong to just 2 people, not 10. Still, most families made do with far less: a curtain over a corner, a blanket pinned to a beam, a screen of bundled reeds. It wasn't about shutting others out completely. It was about desperately holding on to something precious and private of their own. In a world drowning in shared space, privacy was an act of raw invention. Intimacy wasn't spontaneous. It was a carefully planned strategy. Couples learned the rhythm of the room. When the baby was deeply asleep, when the neighbor had gone to market, when the fire burned low and footsteps outside finally faded. Silence became a vital tool, a secret language, a promise. Spoken words were risky, but a glance, a shared look at dusk, could say volumes. They left tiny signals: a shoe turned a certain way, a lantern placed in a specific spot meaning now or danger. In homes with servants, a master might fake illness to send them away. Others waited for chores to scatter the family, fetching water, tending animals, gathering firewood. If you were lucky enough to live near other buildings, a barn, bakehouse, store hut, these became secret havens. A corner behind sacks of grain, a shadowed wall near the chicken coop. These weren't romantic settings. They were stolen moments, carved out from the relentless noise and motion of communal life. And then there was winter. Darkness fell early. The house quieted sooner. People slept longer. In that deep, cold stillness, couples found their narrow window. No doors, no locks. But somehow, a flicker of privacy survived. Just long enough. Wealth changed everything. For the poor, the one-room house was their entire universe. No spare chambers, no separate beds, no choices. Privacy was a cruel dream. But for the wealthier, minor lords, successful merchants, prosperous yeomen, privacy became a badge of status. By the late Middle Ages, some grander homes featured a solar, an upper room reserved just for sleeping, away from the bustling main hall. Here, the lord and lady could retreat. A door, a lock, maybe even a fireplace. A small sacred space where love could unfold without witnesses. Even in castles with many rooms, walls were thin, servants listened, gossip flew. Privacy was never perfect. It was scaled, shaped, and bought. A fire might warm a private chamber, but only wealth could silence the rest of the house. What happened when even curtains failed? You fled the house. Many couples, especially young or unmarried lovers, sought secrecy where no one lived. In drafty barns, cold bakehouses, or the perilous edge of the forest. Places where the cold was biting, but at least no eyes watched. Church records are filled with confessions of sin committed near the stables or fleshly acts behind the mill wall. These weren't tales of wild passion, they were desperate acts of survival. Village night patrols sometimes caught lovers in fields, under trees, behind hedges. Punishment followed, fines, whippings, public shaming. Yet people kept risking it. For married couples, it wasn't always sin. It was survival. If home was too full, too loud, too stifling, then love had to escape, even if it meant lying on muddy ground, in scratchy hay, or braving the icy wind of early spring. One stark 15th century record from Norfolk tells of a couple lying together on a sack of wheat behind the granary door while their tiny house overflowed with guests. The details are harsh, yet undeniably heroic, because in a world utterly hostile to privacy, every single act of closeness was an act of quiet defiance. The church talked endlessly about sex, but almost never about love. Within marriage, sex was allowed, even demanded, but only for making babies. Desire without the goal of children, suspicious. Lust, even between husband and wife, dangerous. Confession manuals from the 1200s instructed priests to grill couples. Guilt wasn't just about the act, but about the setting. The law piled on pressure. Fornication, adultery, even unseemly behavior could land you in the church courts, and these courts thrived on gossip and eavesdropping. In Norwich, 1442, a neighbour testified a couple joined after dark while her mother loudly snored nearby. In another case, a maid vividly described the bedboards creaking and muffled laughter behind the hanging cloth. Homes had paper-thin walls, floors groaned, and people listened, sometimes out of malice, sometimes boredom, sometimes just because they couldn't help it. Someone always knew, so intimacy wasn't just between two people. It was a silent rebellion against constant judgment, against shame, against the ever-present ear pressed against the timber wall. But finally, the deep night offered a small mercy, not privacy, but a kind of cover. When the last candle guttered out, when voices finally dissolved into sleep, when the cold deepened and the darkness became absolute, then the world, for a few precious hours, forgot. There, in that profound silence, couples found tiny slivers of tenderness, a hand carefully slipping into another, a breath warming the back of a neck, words whispered so softly that even the mice rustling in the straw couldn't catch them. No one saw, no one judged, not the priest, not the children, maybe not even God. These weren't grand, dramatic passions. They were small, hard-won mercies, moments that made the daily struggle worth enduring. A husband gently kissing his wife's work-roughened fingers as frost crept across the tiny window. A mother reaching silently across the shared straw just to feel her partner's presence in the dark. There, in that fragile hush, love endured, not with fiery declarations or poetry, but with immense patience and profound stillness. And the darkness for once kept its promise, to cover, not to condemn. By the late 1500s, you could see the change in house plans. Wealthier homes broke apart the single room, a hall for guests, a separate kitchen for work. a dedicated bedroom for sleep, even a withdrawing room meant for pulling away from company. Buildings began to reflect the need for intimacy. Walls were built for silence, not just shelter. Towns saw multi-story houses rise. Sleeping areas moved upstairs. Fireplaces warmed bedrooms. Shutters thickened. Doors finally got locks. For the poor, change crawled. Country cottages stayed crowded, but even there, small improvements crept in. Better fabric partitions, beds tucked into corners, wooden screens, chimneys that reduced choking smoke. Brick replaced crumbling wattle and daub. Glass, once a luxury, began to fill open window holes. As privacy slowly became built into the very structure of life, intimacy finally found space to breathe, without constant shame, without unwanted witnesses, without jarring interruption. This was a revolution not just in space, but in what love itself was allowed to be. So the next time you close your bedroom door, or turn on soft music, or dim the lights just so, remember them. The ones who had none of it. The ones who loved in the dark, crowded, unrelenting closeness. They found a way. Thanks for watching.